Welcome back. We've been following the latest developments from this morning's tragedy at a Catholic school in Minneapolis. 2 children were killed and pronounced dead at the scene. 3 adults and 14 other children were injured by gunfire. The children all were between the ages of 6 and 15, and 6 are believed to still be in critical condition. And like the other school shootings, too many that this country has become very familiar with, it was followed by a chorus of thoughts and prayers. But Minneapolis's mayor is fed up with that.
Don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church. These are kids that should be learning with their friends. They should be playing on the playground. They should be able to go to school or church in peace without the fear or risk of violence, and their parents should have the same kind of assurance.
Bakari Sellers and Scott Jennings are here with us now. Bakari, earlier in the show we played the soundbite from the principal who said, this African proverb, when you pray, move your feet. Yeah. There are many people who want feet to move in the direction of actually addressing what's going on here, rather than just saying it's just something that happens here.
Yeah, but I think we're kind of past that. Most people realize that when you were able to kill 20 some odd young white children in Sandy Hook and nothing changed, that nothing was really going to fundamentally change in this country. This is another sad tragedy. But the problem is that there's an outrage from the right about Jacob Frey, and I'm not a huge Jacob Frey, mayor of Minneapolis. I'm not a huge fan, but he was right. The book of James teaches us that faith without works is dead. And so whether or not he was echoing that sentiment or echoing that scripture, I think that there are a lot of people who were tired of thoughts and prayers, because at the end of the day, thoughts and prayers ring hollow. At the end of the day, thoughts and prayers have led us to having more of these deaths, more of these shootings, more of these individuals who were killed inside of churches, inside of schools, in pews, and
people who are I shouldn't say adjudicated, but people who have known mental illness are still able to very easily, it looks like, according to the police chief in Minneapolis, recently could just go in and get 3 guns, and then use those guns to murder children in a school.
Yeah, I actually had a negative reaction to the mayor's statements today. I think it's wrong, frankly, to vilify or attack people of faith. You said thoughts and prayers ring hollow. I think thoughts and prayers are the most solid on days of tragedy for people who live their faith every day. And I think on a day like today, particularly in a church community, there are probably people praying harder for comfort today than they have ever prayed in their life. And so I think, and I've heard others on the left today go down this line of attack against people of faith, sort of denigrating the idea that they might want to pray today. And so I think his statements were misguided. The thing that struck me today, Abby, truthfully, when I was watching this unfold, was that the 2 little ones that died were 8 and 10. I have 7 and 9. Those are my 2 youngest. They turn 8 and 10 in a few days. And we could probably sit here and argue out all the issues of faith and transgenderism and all the other things that have been raised today, but it strikes me that none of us ever want to know the terror and the absolute empty hole that will never be filled that those parents of the 8 and 10-year-old are going to feel. And I just thought maybe tonight the most useful thing any of us could do would take 10 seconds and just sit quietly and be still and be quiet and think about those families, because they are never going to be the same, no matter what we say.
They aren't. And I think that this is, so many times I've sat in this chair all hours of the day and night, and it doesn't matter what time of day, what day of the week, there's another mass shooting in this country. There are people like Senator Chris Murphy, who represents Connecticut, where Sandy Hook happened. I remember when that happened, and again, many people thought how could we allow this to happen again? It did many times since then, but Chris Murphy tonight was speaking with my colleague Anderson Cooper, and he actually points out something I don't think people have noticed. He says mass shootings have been going down, and here's what he's saying is why.
The rate of mass shootings and school shootings in this country is coming down, not going up. And it started coming down in 2022 when we passed the first significant anti-gun violence bill in 30 years. We now have proof of concept in this country that if you are more careful about putting guns in the hands of dangerous people, you can save thousands of lives. The mythology that the gun lobby has disseminated across this country for decades, that more guns makes us more safe, that's just empirically false.
What do you think about that, Felipe?
At the end of the day, you know, possessing a firearm is a big responsibility. And at the day now that we have mental health issues constantly being at the center of all these shootings, we have to do something to address that. You know, like I said before, in law enforcement, we would actually coach people to, you know what, turn yourself in, basically go in as a self-admitted person. This way you won't be detained in the mental health facility for a great amount of time. And at the end of the day, it comes to bite us back because the person's not really getting the help that they should. And we do have a mental health crisis.
Yeah.
Well, we do have a mental health crisis, but I do want to say, first of all, as a psychologist, I think it's important that we don't stigmatize people who do have mental health challenges, mental health problems. They're the ones who are victimized more often. That being said, going back to the situation of prayers, I think prayers are important, Scott, but I think people want more than prayers at this point. They're really angry. What are we doing in government? What are we doing in federal government that seems to be pulling back from gun violence prevention, from community safety, and so on? So yes, prayer is important. I pray all the time. I'm praying for those families. But what are we going to do after the prayers? How are we going to come together as a society, as politicians, bipartisan action to be able to protect children? How long will we allow them to be collateral damage due to our ideological difference?
Yeah, that's a good question, Scott. What happens after? I mean, what should happen now to stop this from your perspective as a Republican?
Sure. Well, I think the first question you have to ask is, why did it happen? I don't think it happened because of guns. I think it happened because somebody who was clearly suffering from severe mental illness
had access to weapons that would allow them to carry out a terrible shooting.
And the mental illness was encouraged.
But Scott, what about people who don't have mental illness?
I don't think we can tiptoe around this issue. And when you look at the messages that were written in some of the materials and on the weapons that we've seen, I mean, this person obviously was in a dark place.
Obviously.
And I want to know,
obviously.
I'm not sure the government is in that person's life enough to know, but his parents are,
but what
and his
about,
family is.
Scott, what about people who don't have mental illness? We have a huge gun violence issue here in the United States. We lead in gun violence.
But the issue today is quite obviously mental illness. And
if you take away the mental illness, it still
respectfully,
leaves the guns.
The problem is that this issue can't be isolated in a vacuum of today. And I think, to your point,
I agree.
Mental illness is a cop-out for today, which is also why I believe that, you know, I love how the GOP believes that that's God's only party, right? But you have people of faith on both sides.
I don't believe that. We're all God's children, Bakari.
There are people of faith on both sides who are giving their prayers, but who also believe that action is required. Because you asked the question, what happens after the prayers? Well, in this country, what happens after the prayers is that there's another shooting. And the problem is, it's the damn guns. Like there is a mental health problem in this country. I have a CWP. In fact, I took my CWP class with Governor Nikki Haley. We sat beside each other. We went shooting together. That is not foreign in South Carolina. I believe in that amendment and that right. However, the accessibility of weapons is something we have to deal with. Mental health resources is something we have to deal with. And the fact that people get killed in churches, whether or not it's June 2015 in Charleston, South Carolina, or whether or not it's kids in Minnesota who get killed I mean, as a person of faith, it should shake your faith to the core that people are getting gunned down in churches.
Everyone,
and other houses of worship.
We have to leave the conversation
and other houses
there.
Of worship.
Thank you for joining us. We'll be right back in a moment.